So we've been talking about Ve'ata Tetzaveh, how the Moshe of the generation has a job, a role, which is to connect us with the emunah, with the faith that we have within us. And we explained that there are two possible ways in which a Jewish person has this natural faith in Hashem. The one is because there's a higher dimension of the neshama, and that dimension of the neshama is very aware of God. And because it's very aware of God, it kind of filters down a message to us, and that's what wakes us up and allows us to feel faith even in the most unexpected times. And the other is because our neshama at its essence is one with Hashem, so there's no alternative. There's only Hashem. There's nothing else to discuss. We said that the job of the Moshe character, and the Zohar tells us that there is a Moshe in every generation. So the Moshe's job is ve'ata tetzaveh, to connect the Jewish people to Hashem. And by doing so, everybody benefits. The people benefit. They have a deeper experience of faith in Hashem. And the Moshe also benefits because, as the Pasuk says, the verse says, the people are compared to the legs and Moshe to the head. So of course it's the job of the head to guide the legs to walk, but at the end of the day it's the legs who take the head to places that the head could not go on its own. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the leadership and the people. So far what we've identified is two different ways in two different periods of history where we have seen this in action. So there were the Jews in the desert, and they had the original Moshe, and his job was to connect them and to bring them to the state of spirituality and faith in Hashem, and he succeeded, but the primary way in which he did it was through what we call da'as, which is to give them a deep understanding about the greatness of Hashem, and that understanding was so rich and so powerful that it seeped right through every fiber of their being, and they were dedicated to Hashem in an unprecedented way. The only thing is that it was, if you wish, something from the outside. So there was information or insight or miracles that were shown to or shared with them, and that's what gave them that sense of connection. It didn't come from within themselves. That's why that's considered so-called incomplete. They only dedicated themselves to the Torah, but the complete dedication was in the time of Purim. Because in the time of Purim, the circumstances were the exact opposite. Things were bad, they were feeling spiritually disconnected, there was a terrible threat hanging over their heads, and in spite of all of that, the people remained not only committed, but were proactively so. They dafka pushed themselves to do what Hashem wants, in public, at risk to their lives, and that was with the guidance of Mordechai, who was the Moshe of his generation. And basically what that showed them was that when there's a toss-up between anything else in life or my Judaism, I'll always choose my Judaism, as long as I recognize that that's the toss-up. So in the case of the Purim story, they realized these are the choices. Either you're going to give up your Judaism and live, or you're going to give up your life and remain Jewish. And they say, well, in that case, there's no choice, because the essence of my being is that I'm one with Hashem. The Rebbe then points out something incredibly interesting. When the Megillah tells us that the Jewish people had committed themselves to the Torah in this unprecedented way, even beyond the commitment that they made at Sinai, the Megillah actually uses that phrase after the enemies had already been vanquished. Haman and his 10 sons had been hanged, and the rest of the rabble who were coming to try and attack the Jewish people had all been repelled. So he says, in other words, what the Megillah is telling us is something fascinating. Because so far what we said is, kosis lama'or, when you crush the olive, that's when the oil comes out. That's when you have fuel that you can use to light a fire. And we understood that when you crush the olive means that when Jews are under pressure, when there's anti-Semitism, that's when the Jew really comes to the fore. Because that seems to be our experience. The fact, though, that the Megillah tells us that their commitment happened after the miracles were over and the threat had been neutralized, should open our eyes to the fact that there is another layer of this experience. Perhaps, it is the deepest layer of this experience. In other words, we've argued so far that if something from the outside compels me to feel a connection to Hashem, then the connection is not mine per se. The connection is because of circumstance. So if Moshe Rabbeinu comes along and he inspires the people, that tells us how great Moshe is, not how committed the people are. Or if Hashem does miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, and as a result of that, everybody is enthusiastically committed to Hashem, that tells us how powerful the miracles were. It doesn't necessarily tell us how committed the people are. Likewise, if there's a terrible anti-Semitic episode, and because of that everybody becomes dafka and fights back and says, we'll show you that even though we were not so committed to our Judaism, now that you threaten our Judaism, you'll see how committed we're going to be. It's still something external, there's a circumstance, even though it's a, so to speak, irrational time for people to suddenly become extra religious or committed because now there's a threat. Nevertheless, it's external. Something else has pressured them into a position where they say, okay, we're committed. The real challenge of Judaism is, how do you behave when life is, on the one hand, not majorly miraculous and inspiring, and on the other hand, not under fire? In other words, life as we know it in the modern world. Because in the late 20th and of course in the 21st century, there is no country that has a significant Jewish population, yet the government persecutes those Jews or forbids them from practice. The vast majority of the Jewish world today lives in democratic societies that allow them and even assist them in being Jewish. So the threat level is by and large removed, on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also a generation that is far from inspired as they used to be in the old days. We're busy caught up with social media and playing golf and tracking politics and dozens of other activities that kind of fill us in whatever way it does and don't really allow us enough time to really invest in learning and to really experience, so to speak, holiness. In today's world, people very easily don't go to shul, and I'm not talking just because of a lockdown. Why do I have to go to shul? Why do I have to go to a shir? Whatever I need is on YouTube. I like things delivered at my own pace. So in today's world, there really is no pressure, actually, at all. So what prompts a person to keep connected to their Judaism today? Is it a massive miracle? No. Is it a highly inspiring leader? No. Is it terrible threats to our existence? No. So what prompts us? Says the Rebbe, this is the deepest period of Jewish history. Because this is the time of history, remember we said that faith could come from two possible sources. It either comes from my supernatural, super rational dimension of my soul, which is effectively outside of my daily experience, or it comes from the essence of my being, and the essence is always the essence of my being. It's the essence of my mind, it's the essence of my feelings, it's the essence of me under any circumstances. Needless to say, the latter is far, far deeper. So now the essence of my being, there are two ways that I could come to feel it, to experience it. One is because I've been forced to. Somebody's thrown me into a situation where I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, well, who am I actually? And then again, I'll be confronting the essence of my being, but the catalyst will be external. So it's not real essence yet. It's something that's triggered an awareness of my essence. The ultimate experience of my own essence is when there's no force in the world, not positive nor negative, that pushes me. The only reason I'm getting in touch with my essence is because I choose to. Because I decide that in spite of the fact that I have a whole bouquet of things that I could choose to do right now, some of them will be fun, some of them will be relaxing, some of them will be motivating, some of them will be meaningful, some of them will be spiritual. Got so many choices, that's probably the single most descriptive word of modern living is choice. Sometimes we drown in our choices. So the fact that I could be doing something else, and there's nothing forcing me to do what Hashem wants, tells you that every single time I choose to do what Hashem wants, it's because the essence of me pushes me that way. It's not because it's more attractive than everything else that's out there, because the truth is, a lot of what's out there might appear more attractive. It's not because anybody's going to judge me, because we live in a democratic world where everybody is entitled to practice and express themselves as they please. And you don't have the right to criticize somebody else's choices. So I don't choose these things because I have to live up to somebody else's expectations. And we live in a world where nobody's really giving me a difficult time about my Jewish identity, so I don't even have the dafka factor where I'm going to show everybody. In today's world, every single time that a Jewish person makes a choice to do something Jewish, whether it be a mitzvah, or to daven, or to study Torah, regardless of whether it is 10 out of 10 or 1 out of 10, regardless of whether it's something that I'll do for the long term or I'll just do in the now, every single time that is an experience of what we call kosis. I have to break something within myself. I'm not being broken by circumstance or by opposition. I have to break myself. I have to break my urge to do something which I enjoy more than this particular mitzvah. I have to break my interest in just chilling and, having a relaxed time. I have to work really hard on myself to be able to do what Judaism expects of me in a world where I can get away with never touching my Judaism and nobody would actually bother me. So this is the ultimate opportunity for connection with our own soul. And then there's another perspective as well, which is kosis implies that I feel broken. I feel not just that I work with myself and break my natural habits, but I actually feel broken. And that remains the ultimate test. This is the most difficult thing for us to do in this world. In a world where we pretty much have whatever we want at the flick of a button, in a world where the creature comforts that we are used to are things that our grandparents could never have dreamt of in their wildest dreams, in a world of openness and sharing and technology and travel and all of the wonderful things of this world, it's very easy to feel, hey man, life can't get much better than this. If they could just come up with a vaccine, everything will be fine. In that world, a Jewish person is supposed to remind themselves that actually the world is far from how it should be. Because the way Hashem wants the world to be is that Hashem should be revealed, and that there should not be any jealousy or war or illness or death. In other words, the world of Mashiach. And that's the ultimate test. The ultimate test is that in spite of how good life is, I as a Jewish person am supposed to recognize that it's far, far from how it should be. And until Mashiach comes, I could have $1 billion in my bank account, live on a desert island where there is no COVID, have all the technology in the world, surrounded by the people I care for the most without anybody bothering me, and I should feel broken because if that's my life, but somebody else still has a difficult life, then life is not good enough. And if I'm inspired and somebody else is completely spiritually disconnected, then life is not good enough. Until Mashiach comes, life is not comfortable. And that's the work that Jewish people are supposed to do at this point in history, is to remember and to remind ourselves and to get to the point that I'm actually uncomfortable and in distress because Mashiach is not here yet. And then please God, that alone will be good enough to make him come.